Ford, the brand that motorized the world and then spent decades testing how patient drivers really are. A company capable of building legends and cars whose greatest achievement was that no one protested. So this isn't a list of the best Fords or the fastest. This is a ranking of the 10 cars that defined the brand. So let's start the ranking from the very bottom. A car that looked like Donald Trump in corporate form. Supposed to be big, groundbreaking and
tremendous,
but ultimately turning into a plastic compromise wearing a rented suit. And yet, it still earned its place among the most important models in Ford history. Number 10, the Ford Taurus. At a time when most sedans were boxy and clumsy, as if they'd been carved with an axe in a dark garage, the Taurus appeared on American roads as something completely different. Rounded, soft in shape, like a donut on wheels. It was smooth, aerodynamic, and to everyone's surprise, America looked at it, squinted, and said, "Okay, that actually makes sense." Curves, aerodynamics, and the smell of the future suddenly stopped being suspicious. The Taurus didn't start a new era, but it did something just as important, a short, necessary reset that proved the US could design modern cars when it really had to. It sold in absurd numbers, even if later everyone pretended they'd never driven one. Number 9, the Ford Mondeo. The Mondeo was meant to be global. One platform, one car, the whole world, as if markets would suddenly agree on taste, roads and expectations. And, to everyone's surprise, it actually worked. The Mondeo never became a legend or a poster car, but it did something far more important. It showed Ford that it didn't need a different car for Europe, America, and everywhere else, that one well-designed model could work across markets without endless compromises. It didn't change the world, it changed how Ford designed cars, and sometimes that's the harder part. Number 8, Ford Focus. The Focus was the moment Ford politely but firmly informed the competition that it was time to relearn how to drive. A multi-link rear suspension in an ordinary compact sounded like completely unnecessary madness, until it turned out that the madness simply worked. Ford wasn't chasing gadgets or badges, they were chasing balance, steering feel, and a chassis that actually listened to the driver. They set out to build the best handling car in the class, and genuinely succeeded to everyone's surprise. The Focus proved that good engineering can be sexy, even if the car is bought by an accountant who never turns off traction control, shifts at 3,000 RPM, and never wants to find out what oversteer actually is. Okay, now let's move on to 7th place. Number 7, the Ford Escort. The Escort motorized Europe faster than Maduro could leave Venezuela with a Delta Force Escort. It was cheap, simple, and ubiquitous. A car for people, not for dreams or posters above the bed, perfect for work, grocery runs, and disappearing into the crowd. Just when everyone had made peace with the idea that it was nothing more than another boring commuter car, Ford suddenly threw in the RS versions and rally victories almost casually. With that single move, it reminded us that mass appeal doesn't have to mean boredom, and that ordinariness can be a brilliant disguise. The Escort was everywhere, and cars that are everywhere, sooner or later, change history, even if they do it quietly, without fanfare or confetti, usually when no one is looking anymore. Place 6, Ford Fiesta. The Fiesta was created when fuel suddenly stopped being cheap. Small, light, economical, exactly what the world needed, even if no one dreamed about it. This car saved Ford in Europe and taught the company to think globally instead of romantically. It wasn't exciting, and that's precisely why it was brilliant. The Fiesta sold in the millions because it did one thing well. It was sensible, predictable, and cheap to run. And common sense, as it turns out, sometimes beats dreams, especially at the fuel pump, where it always reminded drivers that emotions don't pay the bills. Place 5. Ford GT40. The GT40 wasn't built to be pretty, comfortable, or sensible. It was built to win and to humiliate. Ford, long associated with mass production and family sedans, suddenly decided to step into the world of European racing boots first, and at full speed. The GT40 was low, loud, brutal, and completely unapologetic. Every single part of it was designed with one goal in mind: Le Mans. 4 consecutive victories weren't just a sporting achievement, they were a message sent to the entire world. America could do more than build cars for the masses. It could come to Europe and win by Europe's own rules. Not once, not by accident, but repeatedly. Number 4. Ford Model A. Model A was the moment when someone finally had to tap Henry Ford on the shoulder and say, "Henry, the world has moved on." Enough of one model, one colour, and one vision of motoring mentally frozen in 1915. Ford stubbornly believed he knew better than the market, until the market nearly handed him over to General Motors. Model A wasn't brilliant. It was an emergency measure. More versions, better brakes, a normal-looking body, and a quiet, painfully symbolic admission of a mistake. This car didn't prove Ford was a visionary. It proved that even a visionary sometimes needs to be forcefully unplugged from his own dogmas before the company ends up in a museum instead of a showroom. Time for the final 3. Place 3. The legendary Ford Mustang. This car sold America a dream of freedom, speed, and rebellion, wrapped in the sound of a V8 and the smell of burning rubber. The Mustang was never perfect, and it couldn't care less. It was emotional, loud, and always a little over the top. It reached movies, music, and garages faster than any other Ford, becoming a symbol of a lifestyle rather than a sensible choice. And it's still an icon today, even if it sometimes handles like a coal wagon. Because the Mustang was never meant to turn, it was meant to run. Place 2. Ford F-Series. The first generation of the F-Series from 1948 was the moment Ford rediscovered America, literally. Instead of another car with a truck bed bolted on, Ford built a pickup designed from the ground up for hard work. No chrome, no finesse, no illusions. This truck wasn't meant to look good. It was meant to work, and it did that so well, it launched a sales run that's still going today. It wasn't fast, comfortable, or elegant. It was durable, simple, and always ready. And that's exactly why it became the second most important Ford ever. Because instead of telling legends, it hauled them in the back every single day. And finally, first place. The most valuable Ford car in the entire history of the brand, the Ford Model T. If the Model T were built today, the European Union would shut it down faster than they could finish printing the owner's manual. Too simple, too cheap, too effective. Ford cut production time from hours to minutes and committed a mortal sin. He gave the middle class the freedom to move. Customers could order any colour they wanted, as long as it was black, because why complicate things that work? Without the Model T, there would be no modern cities, no suburbs, and no problems we're still trying to fix today with yet another new car. And that was our most important top 10 cars that built Ford, pulled it out of trouble, or at the very least, made the company look like it knew what it was doing. Sometimes through vision, sometimes by accident, and sometimes in spite of its own management. These were not perfect cars, they were important cars. Time and again, Ford proved it could change motoring on a mass scale, not just by responding to the market, but by shaping it. And even if it didn't always get everything right, its impact on automotive history is impossible to deny. But since we've already shown Ford's best decisions, in the next episode, it's time for the other side of the coin. The 10 worst Fords in the history of the Ford brand. Cars that never should have made it out of the boardroom. Premiere next week. We promise it's going to hurt.